All right, it's officially 2021. And so far, it doesn't seem any different from 2020. Looks the same outside. There doesn't seem to be any end to COVID. Actually, it looks like that whole shit show is about to get a whole lot worse. The political drama doesn't seem to be coming to a close. Civil unrest definitely isn't dying down. Maybe we just entered 2020 Part 2, and if there's one thing that we've learned from the movies, it's that sequels always suck. They never get any better. So in the spirit of the new year, I figured I'd start out with a few thoughts. A few things that I've had on my mind these last few weeks that I'm going to keep on my mind as we go through the new year. So the main thing that's been on my mind is the question of why is it that it seems like the places in this country that are the most messed up seem to primarily vote Democrat. This isn't a bash against people who vote Democrat. It's not an attack. It's an observation. I just keep noticing more and more that we're told by one side, we need to think a certain way, we need to live our lives a certain way. But the places where the majority of people do actually follow that mind state, those are the ones that seem like things are the absolute worst. Let's look at COVID for an example. States that predominantly voted Democrat seem to have had the worst numbers, both in overall cases as well as mortality rate. States that predominantly voted Republican don't seem to have seen the same rates as Democrat states. It's really weird. We can go even further. We can break it down by county. Counties that voted blue were the worst hit counties in the nation. You can take a look at red states and break it down. You can look at the counties that voted blue in those red states, and those are the counties that had the worst COVID numbers. Weren't they the people that got on board early with the whole lockdown, wear a mask in the car when you're by yourself type mentality? You'd think they would have had better luck with COVID. Don't get me wrong, conservatives are getting COVID too. It's not just a disease that's spreading in Democrat strongholds. It just strikes me as odd that, as a general rule, conservatives resist wearing masks. They resist social distancing. They prefer to protect the elderly and those that are at risk, while letting younger people go on about their business and live their lives. But those areas that conservatives dominate haven't seemed to have seen the same rates of COVID. Conservatives literally break every single rule that's been established as far as how to stop the virus, but their communities aren't the ones being hit the hardest with it. Meanwhile, a liberal will scream in your face because you're not wearing a mask. They will then get in their car while wearing a mask and a face shield and rubber gloves while driving by themselves to the grocery store. Their cities, their counties, their states, they're being ravaged by COVID. I mean, they're following the science, right? But it's not working, clearly. It's actually doing the exact opposite of what we're being told that it's supposed to do. COVID isn't the only example. There's a lot of them. What about systemic racism within police departments? I feel like the majority of the time an incident happens where a police officer uses excessive force, and they say that race is a deciding factor. It's in a city where a Democrat is the mayor, in a state where also the governor is a Democrat. Somehow, though, conservatives get the blame. I don't really get that. You've got a state with a long history of Democrat leadership, a city where the majority of the populace votes Democrat, probably has for a long time. Democrats write the laws that get voted on by Democrat citizens to go into effect, and still high rates of police brutality that supposedly stem from racism. I'm not saying that's not a thing. I think there is a certain level of racist type action that happens in this country. It's not something that conservative communities are immune to. It does happen. It's just crazy to me that every time something comes up in the news, it seems to be in a Democrat-ran city or state. Crime rates seem to follow a similar trend. Some of the most dangerous cities in our country have voted blue for a very long time. The policies, the laws that are in place that are attributing to crime rates, that's the responsibility of the Democratic leadership that's been in control of those places. What about gun crime? Chicago, LA, New York, those aren't havens of conservatism by any means. We're talking about places where city councils, mayors, governors are all Democrats. Places where the citizens overwhelmingly vote blue. Yet they have the highest rates of gun crime in the entire nation. It sure in the hell wasn't conservatives in Chicago that helped break the record for shootings for 2020. You can take a hard look at gun crime statistics for every city that's ran by the left, and you'll start to see a little glimpse into what their policies are going to bring nationwide. What about drug usage? What about homelessness? I'm not kidding. The bluest states, they have the highest rates of homeless and they have the most drug use. Let's make an example of my home state, Washington. Seattle's essentially decriminalized crime. Heroin isn't exactly legal, but the Seattle police aren't allowed to do anything about people who have small quantities of the stuff on them. What this has done is create an atmosphere where heroin usage is just skyrocketing through our state. You can go to Seattle and you can see people shooting up heroin in broad daylight in parks, on the sidewalk, alleys. It's everywhere. Nobody even blinks an eye to it anymore. You are more likely to get a dirty look for smoking a cigarette on the streets of Seattle than you are for sitting down and shooting up heroin. The city itself is littered with used needles. They're everywhere. Parks where kids should be able to play, they're a hazard because of all the used needles. It's commonplace in the city to find people passed out on the sidewalk, taking a dump in front of businesses or, in kids' parks. It's actually getting really disgusting down there. It's somewhat fitting that the city used to be known for the Space Needle. Nowadays, though, it's just known for its dirty needles. That's what happens when you decriminalize heroin use. It's been a long-standing policy for prosecutors not to prosecute property crime or low-level assaults. And now the city's passed a resolution that has essentially decriminalized theft. As long as a person claims they're having hard times because of COVID, they can get away with stealing pretty much anything. I'm serious. I wish I were kidding right now, but I'm not. You can go steal from a business that's barely holding on because of COVID restrictions. You don't have to worry about repercussions because, of course, COVID has you down on your luck. You can turn around and take those stolen goods, sell them at a pawn shop so you can afford to buy more heroin. Then you can shoot that heroin up in a park or on the sidewalk. You could literally prop yourself up on the front door of any business in the downtown area, shoot up that heroin, and not have to worry about being bothered. When you're done, you can take that used needle, toss it to the side, and go on about your business. It's just another day, right? The liberals of the city have decided that you haven't done a single thing wrong. You want to mug an old lady in the street, take her purse and jewelry? No worries, no prosecution. You want to steal a car? No prosecution. Hell, if you're homeless, you can set up an entire camp on the sidewalk. You can do all kinds of crazy shit, yell and scream at tourists. People have been pelted and splashed down with bottles of urine. No one's going to say a damn thing to you. On the bright side, though, a major priority of the city was banning plastic straws and bags, as well as creating a massive tax on any sugary drinks, ammo, and guns. That's Seattle, the crown jewel of the Pacific Northwest. A place where you can shoot up heroin in the streets, but you damn sure better not think about using a plastic straw in your drink or a plastic bag for your groceries, because that's just not okay. Again, I want to stress, I am not at all saying that conservative communities don't see drug usage and homelessness. I'm not saying that conservative communities don't see crime rates. All communities see crime, all of them, whether it's big or small. We all have people struggling with addiction. We all have people down on their luck without a place to live. All of these things just seem so much more prevalent these days with the way the governors are handling lockdowns and COVID. Every community has assaults and theft. Every community has a handful of assholes who want to judge people because of the color of their skin. But my question is, why is it that the highest rates of all of these issues seem to be concentrated in those Democrat-ran cities and states? I mean, they know best, right? They keep telling us that. They keep telling us that we all need to think like them. We all need to live our lives like them. But what I'm seeing as far as statistics is that their policies and their way of life are creating nothing but hardships for others. 2020 was a shit year for all of us. People from all walks of life went through hell this year. My main takeaway from the year is that certain policies, they just don't work. Things like lockdowns and forced mask mandates, they aren't doing anything for COVID rates. Defunding the police and pushing to restrict access to firearms for legal gun owners, yeah, that's really going to make communities safer. Turning a blind eye to heroin use, that's not helping anything. If anything, it's just making more people use heroin because it's accepted. It's considered as normal now. Refusing to prosecute crime in order to pad your crime rates, that's not actually stopping crime. Sure, it's making it look like you have less crime, but the crime's still happening. We're in a new year. It's 2021. There's a very high likelihood that at the end of this month, Joe Biden's going to be moving into the White House. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, yet expecting a different result. Remember that. In the coming months and years, we're going to see a lot of that going on. We're going to see a lot of failed policies get doubled down on and pushed harder than ever. More lockdowns, higher unemployment rates, higher crime rates, economy going down the shitter. We're going to see more restrictions on all of you being able to exercise your Second Amendment rights. Peaceful protests, rioting, looting, cities on fire. There's going to be more of that stuff, all because the Orange Man is bad. Make no mistake, the next 4 years, they're going to be interesting to say the least. The last thing that I want to see is communities suffer and, the way of life in America get worse and worse. But honestly, I don't see any positives in the next few years. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. It's not very often that I say that, but I do hope that I'm wrong there. Only time's going to tell. Just remember, if your ideals have created more crime, more violence, more disparity within your community, then it's time to take a good, strong look on whether or not you're right or wrong.